The snow had turned black from the fires, and the rumble of metal across frozen ground sounded like a second winter wind closing in on Moscow. For months, the German drive had tasted victory. Lightning columns, blitzed villages, trains spilling prisoners and equipment. By late 1941, the Wehrmacht reached for the city itself, confident that winter would be an inconvenience, not an enemy. What the German advance met instead were hulks of steel that did not behave like the tanks they expected. KV heavy tanks that ate shells, and T-34 medium tanks that seemed to skate over the earth as if the maps were wrong and the mud did not exist. The through line here is simple and sharp. It was not merely steel or numbers that stopped the German clock, but machines designed for the long Russian winter paired with crews who learned to fight cold and surprise with equal ferocity. The first time a German platoon ran into a KV was a rude arithmetic problem. These were not the thin-skinned tractors the German crews had been trained to find and outflank. They were a new kind of obstacle, armor thick enough to shrug off most German guns at normal ranges. An infantryman caught in the open smelled warm inside the tank only if he survived, which many did not. The KV did something the German doctrine could not immediately accommodate. It turned frontal assaults into Pyrrhic ventures. That reality shifted operational calculus in a way no briefing could. Commanders who had planned 10-kilometer thrusts now had to account for 20 minutes, then an hour, then the grim fact that a single KV could block a narrow road for a day. The T-34 was quieter about its revolution. At first glance, it appeared almost modest next to the KV, but its genius hid in lines and balance. Sloped armor made hits glance. A wide track spread the tank's weight over frozen loam and newly formed crusts of ice, which meant it could maneuver where narrower-tracked machines would pitch sideways and die. Its 57-millimeter gun was not monstrous on paper, but it fired solidly and with a higher muzzle velocity than the guns many German crews expected. Mechanically, the T-34 was crude and loving in a way that matched the landscape, easy to repair in the field, tolerant of poor fuel, and able to cough back to life after a night spent with radiators half frozen. Crews learned to wrap wet blankets around exposed parts, pour vodka into carburetor lines to keep frost from locking moving pieces, and sleep in the hull with the engine off to keep warm. Those small improvisations multiplied into operational endurance. Behind these machines, factories in the Urals and beyond were churning not only because of design, but because of necessity. Production lines shifted eastward, and the Bolshevik factories learned to simplify so the machines could be maintained by hand in muddy villages or on snowy roads. A lesser-known fact is that the T-34's wide tracks were born not of elegance, but of railroad constraints. Designers preserved narrow enough widths to move wagons quickly, then pushed boundaries for mobility. Another hidden gem, KV turrets were sometimes socketed with extra radio insulation because Russian winter noise did not only come from artillery. Voice and cramped commands froze air each time a hatch opened, and radio silence could be the difference between cohesion and confusion. The German response was textbook adaptation, until it was not. Engineers in the field hunted for penetrating ammunition, for longer guns, for new tactics of combined arms. But the Wehrmacht had logistical limits. Their anti-tank guns were long-ranged and precise on firmer ground, but the mud and ice changed sightlines, created false defilades, and once a T-34 crossed a crest, it could not be predicted where it would appear next. Moreover, the Germans had not counted on the tactical stubbornness and innovation of Soviet crews. A lieutenant in a T-34 who lost his main sight would lay paper over optical cracks, light a candle inside, and wait until the glow revealed silhouettes through the frost on the glass. These small acts were technical improvisation and psychological armor. The crew who warmed their controls with kettle steam had a different kind of courage from a crew shooting blanks into the freezing air. Midway through that winter came the moment when design and human will braided into an aha moment. On a highway outside Moscow, a single KV and two T-34s faced a battalion of German panzers trying to seal a gap. The KV, immovable on a narrow bridge, absorbed direct hits and refused to burn. The T-34s skated around frozen ditches, flanking and targeting tracks and optics. The German confidence frayed into methodical weakness. Each hit that failed to immobilize, each hour that the bridge remained blocked, folded time back on the attacker. It was not that Soviet tanks were invulnerable, it was that they rewrote the tempo of battle. When the Germans finally called artillery, the KV lay burned and cold, but the pause it had inflicted allowed reinforcements to plug the hole. That pause was the real weapon. Momentum lost, supply columns stalled, and morale that had been counting victories now counting losses. The climax of winter 1941 was not a single glorious charge, but a series of such pauses stretching like a ragged seam around Moscow. The KVs and T-34s did not merely fight. They forced recalculations: where to fuel, how to bring ammunition in months when horses could not haul and engines seized into ice. The human cost was immediate and brutal. Crews who survived one engagement might perish the next from exposure or simple mechanical failure. Yet the machines endured long enough for weather to become an ally. Frost is impartial until it rewards those who design for it. When spring came and mud returned to the roads, the German drive had been bled not only by losses, but by a new respect for Soviet armored doctrine. Factories kept making T-34s and KVs, and more importantly, they made crews who expected to fight in snow and to fix what was broken. The takeaway is blunt. The winter halted the German clock because Soviet armor combined technical innovations suited to the terrain with a brutal apprenticeship in cold-weather improvisation. That season taught commanders on both sides that a single tank on a narrow road could decide a timetable, and that design choices, sloped armor, wide tracks, resilient engines, could be multiplied by human stubbornness into strategic effect. Decades later, the fields outside Moscow still hold the bones of that lesson, but in that winter, the living learned it with frostbitten fingers and a fierce, necessary persistence. If you enjoyed this, tap like and subscribe. It really helps. And drop a quick comment telling us where you're watching from: the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world. Your reply helps the video reach more people just like you.